This is a pilot episode originally titled Trades Podcast That Doesn't Have a Name Yet. We're happy to republish it under its branded name, Off the Clock, Toolbox Talk, Episode 2. If you find you're unsettled today by listening, reach out to a trusted friend or go to tradespodcast.com.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the podcast that doesn't really have a name yet. We're talking about men in trades and the toxic drug poisoning crisis, and we would love your help to come up with a name. You can go to tradespodcast.com and leave some feedback.
I'm Karen, and I am the creator of this project. And
my name is Daniel Snyder. I'm a coordinator for Overdose Response Project in beautiful British Columbia, Canada.
I don't know if we want to start with something funny or not, but I have an update to the story of my friend who accidentally stabbed her husband in the leg with a barbecue knife and then got questioned at the hospital. Yes, Daniel just did air quotes, accidentally. So I ran into another friend and told her that I just retold that story. And she's like, no, that's not how it happened. So what actually happened is he stabbed himself in the leg with a barbecue knife. And if you know what a barbecue knife is, it's like got the long wooden handle, but it's like curved at the top and then it has serrated on the side. He stabbed himself in the leg. He was bleeding everywhere. And she was like, oh my God, we need to take you to the hospital. And he's like, honey, it's fine. It's fine. Don't worry about it. And she sat there and argued with him for like 10 minutes, trying to convince him to take him to the hospital. And we couldn't figure out how he stabbed himself with a blunt-ended knife because it's only serrated on the side. And then at the hospital, that's why she was so upset that she was being questioned at the hospital, because he had stabbed himself and he didn't even want to go to the hospital. She's like, I'm the one who's made him come to the hospital. Why are you accusing me? So it ended up being quite humorous. And then she was mad for the rest of the day. At the barbecue that we were all at. So
but we still don't know how he stabbed himself exactly.
No, that does remain a mystery because he was by himself when it happened.
Shows small details can change a story greatly, right?
Yes.
Who stabbed who? And it sounds like, I think as a guy I can relate to that. It's like, oh, I don't need to take care of this. I'm fine. It's it's not that deep.
Exactly.
Yeah, we can just use some duct tape on this.
Yes.
Oh, totally. I'm a big fan of duct tape myself.
Yeah, I know. My trades experience has always been getting the job done is priority number one. So if I'm suffering either physically or mentally or some other way, that takes a back seat to completing the project. And there's pressure from all the people around me to act that way as well. That this is why you're here. You're here to work. You're here to get jobs done. So if you're not capable of doing that, you're not valuable here.
Yeah, and I would add to that those kind of messages and those pressures, they work so effectively because I think our socialization comes way before that as males in our society, where just having an attitude of like caring about what we're experiencing, like having more of a sense of, oh, this hurts, or oh, I'm feeling this now. As soon as you get shamed for demonstrating that you're in pain or that you're sad or scared, as soon as you get called names for that on the playground, you learn that,
yeah.
Oh, well, I guess that's not okay. I guess I'm supposed to be tough, right?
Yeah.
Or playing a sport and you get hurt and it's like, hey, come on, get up, keep playing, suck it up, tough it up. Those messages come very young in life. So yeah, the trades becomes kind of a amplified extension of that.
Yeah. Yeah. By the way, we have George Passmore with us this morning, and George and Daniel both worked on the YouTube video Building Hope. which was one of the first video pieces that I saw about the drug poisoning crisis in British Columbia. It came out 2 years ago. Is that
Last
correct?
year.
Last year. It was only 1 year
Last
ago
year.
it came out.
Yeah. Yeah, June of last year.
Does it have a subtitle, Building Hope? And then what's the subtitle?
Substance use in the trades.
Substance use in the trade. So if you search that on YouTube, you'll find the video. And there's a red carpet event.
And there's 4 1-minute spotlight videos that kind of feature each person that we who was sharing their experiences. So that's a little bit more shareable on social media if we're wanting to put messages out.
Oh, and the other thing I was going to say too is that George is a qualified therapist.
So I'm a director at a place called Sources Community Resources. It's a large multi-service organization, but I oversee the substance use services, counseling, child and family, overdose prevention, and peer support. I'm also co-chair of the Tides of Change community action team on overdose prevention in South Surrey, White Rock. It's a mouthful. Yeah, in BC, we all have these community action teams in each region that really looks at localizing efforts and initiatives to reduce harms. And we've been working at that in our area since 2018. And, it became clear that there were some populations that were being disproportionately affected. And that many of these populations were very hard to reach and engage with our efforts to increase awareness and reduce stigma and encourage to change drug using or substance using practices and getting help when it's indicated. So yeah, there's an interesting bit of research that was done on Vancouver Island by the Vancouver Island Construction Association and Vancouver Island Health Authority. And they're looking at of all the fatalities, what's the profile of folks? And so of course, disproportionately is men.
Mm-hmm.
And men in that, especially in that area, age from 30 to 50. And many of those folks were employed. And of those who are employed, the strong majority were in the trades. So there were some themes that emerged from that, and as they kind of drilled down into what were some of the stories that they were hearing, and how was it that people were finding themselves at risk of fatality. And there are 3 main themes that kind of were identified. So one was that there seemed to be, a percentage of folks who had a pre-existing substance use challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's many things that can contribute to that, of course. Trauma in one's history, and not having learned to manage that through substances. It's just a very common way we deal with what happens to us.
Can I interrupt your train of thought? In a sentence or two, what is trauma?
I could do a whole podcast on that.
It'll be a whole, it could be a whole podcast, and it could be a whole episode. We will do a whole episode or 5 on trauma throughout our 4 seasons that we're planning to do of this podcast. Just because when I hear people say the word trauma, what my experience has been is that none of us think that we have trauma for some reason. Like we don't think that what's happened to us qualifies as trauma.
And that's very fair, because I think when people hear that word, they say, "Oh, that's not me. I don't have that."
Yeah.
And yet, I think a more, reflective process would be, what are the ways in which my early development prepared me to learn to self-regulate, to be able to connect meaningfully with others, and to have a nervous system that is wired for security and wellness. So when there is, because we all need a responsive, an attuned, responsive, non-stressed caregiver that we can rely on to attend to our needs, right?
Yes.
And if we don't get that, we don't develop a nervous system that knows how to self-soothe.
Yeah. And I'm kind of have a bit of a laugh in my voice right now, because in this day and age, I know lots of people that strive for that, but it's difficult to achieve that as a caregiver.
Oh, yes. So not to worry for caregivers and parents listening that, yeah, if you're stressed or, a bit overwhelmed and not always attentive, yes, that can be okay. Yeah, but overall, that need for overall safety, protection, as well as like when I'm upset, is somebody attending to that,
Mm-hmm.
right? Are my feelings being addressed or tuned to so that I'm not feeling alone in this world? So some would say trauma is actually not just when an overwhelming event occurs to us
Mm-hmm.
that overwhelms our capacity to make sense of it and cope with it, but it's when there's a lack of response from the world
Yeah.
that where I feel supported, protected, and nurtured.
Mm.
So it's more the absence of they know that when overwhelming things happen to kids, if that gets responded to and they were restored to a sense of safety and protection and they feel loved and supported, that does not develop into things like PTSD or complex PTSD.
Mm.
So that was one of the themes that were identified, in the Vancouver Island research project. That not that everybody had in that first theme, not everyone had a significant trauma background, but there's a reason why people had pre-existing struggles with substance use. It was already a part of their life that had a force to it. The second path was certainly ways of managing pain.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't imagine being an iron worker, et cetera, not having something hurting. And
Yeah.
then that pressure to get the job done, be part of that dedication to just showing up to work every day, not complaining.
So
Um,
the first one that you identified, the trauma, is actually the emotional pain that we talked about in our first episode, and the second one is the physical pain.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yes. And so I've heard many, many stories of people who started off being prescribed something to manage the pain. And of course, we develop tolerance to things like opioids, no matter how we're taking them in.
Mm-hmm.
And so if that stops being effective, and then we go back and say, "Hey, doc, I'm still in a lot of pain." So they increase the dose, and you tolerate to that. And then at some point, the doctor goes, "Well, this is too high. I could get in trouble from the college." And there was a time when the College of Physicians did clamp down on this,
Hmm.
and you know they came out with prescribing guidelines that really changed the way that opioids were being administered.
Mm.
So that really saw quite a strong flood into the unregulated market,
Mhm.
which as of 2016 became very dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third stream that was identified was, really around the work hard, play hard culture.
Mm-hmm.
That isn't just exclusive to the trades, of course.
No, it's not at all.
Not at all. I think there's many industries that have this,
Yeah.
and a lot of a lot of our society enjoys their free time, and substances can be an enjoyable part of that.
Yeah.
Um, and pre 2016, that was not so problematic. So those are really the three themes that we're looking at and thinking, okay, how do we get messages to folks who maybe have had a lifelong challenge with substances and encourage a culture within the trades where it's okay and normalized to address that as any other medical issue. And secondly, what are other ways that pain can be addressed that
Mm-hmm.
does not put people at risk? And then thirdly, how can people play hard in a safer way?
Mm. Yeah.
And getting those messages out to the trades is it's not like we put on these public events and we're going out in White Rock, South Surrey, and making sure people understood, hey, you're using alone, use the Lifeguard app or the Brave app.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, there's overdose prevention sites now. We opened one in White Rock.
Nice. Congratulations.
Yes, yeah, people are attending it.
Excellent.
And learning how to start slow and do a tester. And there was no pathway to get these messages out. The public events we were doing, tradespeople weren't coming up to that and saying, "Oh, what's this you guys are talking about? Oh, there's fentanyl out there. Oh, now there's fentanyl and benzos together. Wow, okay.
Mm-hmm.
So my real inspiration for this was someone I cared about very deeply in 2017. I'll just slow down because this still carries a lot of emotion for me.
Yeah.
His wife had died the year before to drug poisoning. She'd been abstinent for several years, and she worked in the hospital system. And she just went out with some friends and thought she was using cocaine, and it had fentanyl in it, and she died. And so a year later, this person in my life, he was really having a hard time with it. He was raising their son, 5-year-old, and he was having a struggle. And he'd been abstinent for many years as well. Had a pre-existing challenge. He was an iron worker. Very accomplished iron worker, highly respected in his trade, and had really worked hard to find abstinence in his life. And all of his thinking was about abstinence. There was no concept of harm reduction in his awareness. So when he was struggling and had we can say this, an effort moment, right? And got some cocaine, and that was it for him. So this 5-year-old was without both parents. So I went to the funeral, and all these guys rolled up in their Harleys, and these big, tough dudes, all iron workers, and they loved this guy. And what I saw really struck me. I heard guys saying to each other, "I'm sick of coming to these things." And one guy grabbed the other guy and said, "Hey dude, you take care of yourself, okay? I love you, and this is a big concern.
Yeah.
So stay well." And I thought, wow, how can this kind of sense of care that really penetrated that culture of hypermasculinity and the stuff we don't talk about, how can we enable a pathway for this kind of guy to guy, trades worker to trades worker message?
Well, you know what inspired me in the beginning of this to even invest in this work and try to reach people who are a lot like myself was I read a report, I believe it was 2018 perhaps, called The Hidden Epidemic, and it was by one of our medical health officers here in BC who had identified exactly what you're talking about, George, with the disproportionate impact on men in trades and the significant number of employed people who are dying of toxic drug poisoning. And they're describing the data, what's going on, who these people are. And I really had this moment of acute realization that, oh, this is me, or this was me. And had I continued using opioids in the way that I was post 2016, post, the saturation of fentanyl in the drug supply, I would not be alive today. There's absolutely no chance. And I know that at the core of my being, because my drug use was always hidden. It was always behind closed doors, always in bathrooms. I was always alone. And I wouldn't have followed Lifeguard or Brave app. They didn't exist at those times. I probably wouldn't have used them anyway. I also would not have been someone who would have accessed an overdose prevention site, like going somewhere for safe consumption. I used, all day, so to speak. I mean, I would have had to live at a safe consumption site. But not only that, I intentionally would have wanted to avoid a place like that for fear of being identified there, for fear of being associated there, because there was a belief within me that because I happen to be able to maintain employment, I must be somehow better than people who aren't.
Yeah.
Or maybe that just hadn't caught up to me, or all sorts of dysfunctional beliefs about who I was and what was going on in my life. And when we talk about trauma, like I'm curious your perspective here, George, because one of the errors I think that I made was this comparison of my trauma to the trauma of others, in which therefore I minimized my experiences. I didn't really value as significant. I thought, hey, I should just be able to get over this and to deal with it. And I wasn't really critically thinking about how it had actually impacted and was affecting my life, and what was this pain. How do I get in touch with this pain? How do I understand this pain? Because I remember counselors and professionals asking me, about it. What is
Mm-hmm.
this thing? And I
Mm-hmm.
really didn't have words. I didn't have an answer. I didn't know how to express it. I didn't even know how to relate to the pain that I was feeling.
Oh, and Daniel, you just touched on something that was really my hope when I started this project, or started the ideas of this project, was to just give some language, just give some words to what's going on, because I don't find that, I mean, not only does it exist as a cultural thing, but just like the language to describe it, if it's not there, then how can we understand it? And that it's not all woo woo. Like we can describe it, we can understand it, and my word that I always use, we can deconstruct it.
Absolutely. And Daniel, I think it's important what you're bringing up, because it's so easy for any one person to distance themselves from reflecting on something in a honest way and in a self-compassionate way. So if you think about, what it is that a person gets from using a substance, right? For many people, of course, it's to feel good for a moment, to have some fun, maybe a bit of relief. But for so many people, like the person that I was describing, who died in 2017, the first time he was 11, and the first time his older buddies gave him a beer and he tried that, he went, "Oh wow, where has that been all my life? Is this how I can feel?"
Mm-hmm.
So for him, it didn't matter how harsh the story was. He had a sense that the people that were meant to keep me safe are scary.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so he never experienced a sense of comfort and being seen and being, emotionally connected with. So he had this constant hypervigilance, like the refrigerator hum in the background of awareness, just always kind of like scanning for what mood are people in? Am I okay? Right? And it becomes so normalized you don't even notice the
Yeah.
refrigerator hum, right? So I think of it too as, we all have different versions of like attachment injuries or attachment disruptions. And for some people, if that's significant enough, right, and you're a little kid and you need things, but you don't have the sense that I can count on other people to meet my
Mm-hmm.
needs. Well, and then we ask guys, say, well, hey, it's okay to reach out for help.
Yeah.
So then,
Yeah.
as you say, Daniel, like, yeah, you weren't going to be someone that was going to reach out for some support very easily, or use even an app, or, you know, because there's a sense that, well, my needs don't matter, I guess. Right? Isn't that how a kid would make sense of not being intended to?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, yeah, then the idea, so shame really is a sense of, I'm not worthy as I am. Right.
Yeah, that shame narrative, I can't remember. Karen, I may have mentioned it in the first episode, so I don't know
We
how
did.
repetitive we want to be, right?
Yeah.
But
Well, and that the feeling, I actually prefer to call it the feeling that I'm not good enough, because I relate to that more. Shame
yeah.
is a big, heavy word and nobody wants to talk about it. It triggers a lot of us.
Mm.
But when people talk about the feeling that I'm not good enough, I 100% immediately connect to that.
Well, that thought of I'm not good enough, and attached to a million variations of I'm not good enough,
Mm-hmm.
was the was the refrigerator hum in my life. And that was the thing I was always on hyper alert for people around me to be confirming, right? So if I'm exposing a vulnerability or sharing a weakness, whatever it may be, especially one as heavy as, well, I believe I'm addicted to this drug and this has got me fully captured. I don't see any way out. For me, there was no way I could tell anyone that, because it would be confirming the belief system within myself that I'm not good enough. And I was doing everything I can to disconnect from that, to pretend it didn't exist, or well, yeah, to be as detached as possible. So it kind of was this, it was a cycle, clearly a pattern in my life, and every time that and it was consistently reinforcing itself, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm looking for people around me to also reinforce it, and they give me an excuse or a justification to really continue, in a sense.
Absolutely. And as a counselor, I'm always amazed that when you create a space for people to start just reflecting on it with curiosity, it's like, okay, if I've stepped back from my substance use for a bit, what is it that I'm noticing is here? Right. And how do I understand that? So, I like what you said earlier, Danielle, around people kind of comparing to others and say, wow, man, come on, I've had some good things in my life. It's not that bad. And that's okay. So we don't want to give this message that, oh, you need to dig down and find all the dysfunctional stuff and all the pain in there. Looking at your relationship with substances does not need to involve going down a rabbit hole. However, I think having the compassion that it's not like I just chose this because I have bad character, right? Or
Yeah.
bad values, or that I should know better. What's wrong with me that I'm doing this? I know, I see the consequences. What the heck's wrong with me? So, really having the sense that there's always a human trajectory occurring here.
Mm-hmm.
Mm,
And so, how else, if I were to let go of this substance or change my use of it, and I really connect with, well, what need is getting met here? What function does it serve? How else can I meet this need? How
Mm-hmm.
else can I have fun, connect with people,
mm,
right? Reduce my social anxiety, um, manage this pain, work through my sense of stress, right? So, yeah, go ahead, Daniel.
when you say this idea of stepping back from your substance use a little bit, and then suddenly perhaps things are coming up, you notice things, maybe, what is that stepping back like? What can that look like for people? Because I know when I hear that language, often
Mm.
I think I hear the voice of someone in the back of my head telling me, stop using drugs, you got to get sober in order to understand. And I'm
Yeah.
like, what is stepping back, or what can it look like for people?
I hear, don't you're not allowed to have fun anymore. The fun
Oh,
is over. That's what I hear when it's like stepping back from substance use. That's it.
okay.
No more fun.
This is a good clarification. Let me clarify. For me, stepping back is just getting curious about it,
Hmm.
just having a reflective thought without, somebody will say, oh, if I analyze it too much, then it kind of wrecks the fun. And yet, if you've got a relationship with something, like I drink coffee, right? And, when I step back from my caffeine use, I think, how else could I wake my brain and body up each day?
Mm-hmm.
What else could support that maybe also could have some other health outcomes for me
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
and not have the afternoon crash, right? So it's not saying, oh, you got to give up coffee. Not at all. But I can start thinking about, well, could I delay it in the morning? Maybe could I have one cup instead of two? Could I experiment with going a little bit of time without it? Right? How
Mm-hmm.
else can I notice other ways that I can energize myself? What else could add up to, good alertness each day? So
Mm-hmm.
that curiosity about it, as opposed to just autopilot, because all these patterns get so wired deeply that we don't even give it consciousness. it's after a while, as it's a program that just kind of runs itself. So
Mm.
stepping back from it, I think, is just having a moment to consider, all right, what is my relationship with this? How might I like it to be? What else can actually support my best life?
Mm.
To what degree is substances actually taking me closer to or further away from my best life? Worthy questions.
Very good questions. And we've now started talking about harm reduction, really.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
And I think for me, for many years, it was either you're using or you're not. So it was black and white. Like that was it. And there was no freedom actually to have more critical and nuanced thought about my substance use, like the questions you're just putting forward, George, because the only option was become abstinent. I know for me, often that was the goal, that was what I was aiming at, but attaining that tomorrow was just so overwhelming that it always stopped me from even trying. Well, not always, but a lot of the time it stopped me from even trying. And really, a lot of the people around me at the time would not have been okay with the idea of harm reduction, or like considering alternative approaches, maybe reducing use, or switching to a less harmful substance, or many potentials that we can pursue when it comes to addressing our substance use that are not so reduced to just using or not using.
This is the end of Building Hope, Digging Deeper, Part 1. Daniel and George continue our conversation on harm reduction in Part 2. Check the show notes or tradespodcast.com for links to the video Building Hope, Substance Use in the Trades. This has been a Fraser House Society project, hosted by Daniel Snyder, co-hosted and produced by Karen Jansen, managed by Delan Young, from the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Coast Salish peoples. Production of this material has been made in part through a financial contribution of Health Canada. The views expressed herein do not necessarily reflect the views of Health Canada or Fraser House Society. The content of this podcast is conversation between people with living experience and should not be taken as professional advice. If you're a tradesperson who wants to help make things better, please contribute at tradespodcast.com.